Hello, everyone. This is Karuna, and the chapter that we cover today is Poets and Pancakes. Now, the mere mention of this chapter fills you with a lot of, I don't know, a lot of chaos and confusion because this chapter, when you read it as an integrated whole, you kind of get lost somewhere in between. तो बहुत बच्चों को ये इसलिए पसंद नहीं आता because halfway through the chapter उनको समझ नहीं आता इस चैप्टर में क्या हो गया, हमने कहाँ से शुरू किया, कहाँ पे पहुंचे. कई बच्चों के ऊपर से ये चैप्टर निकल जाता है. तो what we do today is we let's read this chapter in parts, bits and pieces, and then we cover it as a whole. So you know how let's go ahead with overview. क्यों हमने ये chapter, why is this, what's the purpose of this chapter being given as in your syllabus is because ये जो chapter है ये it talks about the integration of work, integration of people, integration of culture in the filmmaking industry, the Gemini studio. तो इस स्टूडियो में अलग अलग तरीके का काम, अलग अलग तरीके के लोग, and how the final product came out is what is discussed in this chapter. So Asoka Mitran, who is the writer of this chapter, he's written it talking about, it's a tongue-in-cheek humor wherein he talks about various things that work inside this Gemini studio. So let's start. We begin with the overview of this chapter. We start with Gemini Studio and its inner workings. तो ये हम bits and pieces में करेंगे. पहले हम क्या देखेंगे, हाउ डिड द स्टूडियो वर्क. पोएट्स एंड पैनकेक्स में पोएट्स कौन है, पैनकेक्स क्या है. वी वुड सी दैट ये इनर जो काम था इनका, हाउ डिड इट वर्क, हाउ डिड द मेकअप डिपार्टमेंट वर्क, पैनकेक एंड इट्स यूसेज, हायरार्किकल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द मेकअप डिपार्टमेंट. तो वो ऑल्दो ये काम बहुत छोटा सा लगता है, बट देयर वाज अ हायरार्की इन हाउ पीपल यूज्ड एंड अप्लाइड मेकअप. तो एक स्ट्रिक्ट ऑर्डर ऑफ लाइन ऑफ ऑर्डर था जहां पे देयर वाज अ चीफ मेकअप आर्टिस्ट हु डू मेकअप ऑफ द लीड हीरो एंड हीरोइंस एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. देन वी टॉक अबाउट टू लीड कैरेक्टर्स, एक है ऑफिस बॉय, दूसरा है सुबू. Then we talk about cultural and political backdrop. मतलब as in how we progress. हमने after we talk about this lawyer and his team, story department, और वो story department क्यों बंद हो गया. And then we talk about how there was this movement known as the communism. Communism जब आया और how did it affect the people in Gemini Studio? How it did it affect the functioning and work of people at the Gemini studio. उसके counterfeit में, in opposition to communism came moral rearmament movement, which proposed a philosophy that was complete opposite to communism. तो उससे क्या effect हुआ? Then this arrival of this guest called Stephen Spender, and finally Asoka Mitran's realization of the fact that Stephen Spender, why had he come to Gemini studio? Again, let's divide it in parts. पहले हम क्या करेंगे, अबाउट द स्टूडियो, जेमिनाई स्टूडियो, वहां पे काम कैसे होता था, वो मेकअप कैसे होता था. बिकॉज पोएट्स एंड पैनकेक्स में पैनकेक्स बिकम्स योर लीड की वर्ड विच टॉक्स अबाउट पैनकेक इज अ ब्रांड ऑफ मेकअप दैट वाज यूज्ड ऑन द actors and actresses. So pehla, functioning of the studio. Second, what was this pancake. Third, the hierarchy that was maintained in the studio. Fourth, these people, the lead people, Subu and the office boy and Subu. Then we talk about the lawyer and his story department. Then we talk about communism and moral rearmament. And then finally we talk about Stephen Spender's arrival. And seventh is Asoka Mitran's realization of why Stephen Spender had come to Gemini Studio and what was the purpose behind it. So we understand it in 8 different parts. So let's go with part 1. Now, what was Pancake? Pancake was the brand name of a makeup material. Now, ये बहुत ही humorously ये attempt किया गया है. एक और मैंने आपकी क्लास के लिए, there's another class that I have arranged only dealing with the literary devices like the devices like satire, irony, humor. ये सब इस chapter में कहाँ और क्यों use किए गए हैं. That another class we deal with specifically these topics. Let's just go read and understand what this chapter is about. So, Pancake was a brand of makeup that was used on the lead actors and actresses. क्यों तब बहुत अच्छी cinematography और बहुत अच्छा screen play और ये सब नहीं होता था, तो in order to make these characters stand out, there was a lot of pancakes, the makeup that was applied, so they were literally made to look hideous in order to make them presentable, is what the author writes. So, in a very humorous tone, he's explained that actors के इन characters को इतना makeup लगा के, they would make them look bad so that they would look stand out among the people, so that they would look different, they would look to be somebody to be represented on stage. Now, the studio purchased pancakes in truck loads for mass use. Famous stars like Greta Garbo, Miss Kohar, Vajanti Mala used pancake makeup. In contrast, some actors like Rati Agnihotri might not have heard of it क्योंकि ये जो actors हैं ये बहुत they were much later in line. That's how they might not have heard of it. Pancakes served as a key ingredient in transforming actors' appearances on screen. So how they looked is how the author describes it as they were slapped with these makeup products, and they looked like red hued monsters. So they looked hideous. ये keywords हैं, red hued monster, hideous, in order to make them look presentable. तो ये pancake उनके चेहरे पे लगाते थे, they would look bad, uh, really really bad. They would not look very nice, but what purpose would it serve was they would look different from all these people, and one would know, उनको देख के ऐसा समझ में आ जाता था that this category is completely different from the crowd, so probably the actors and actresses. Now, the makeup room resembled like a busy hair cutting salon. It featured half dozen large mirrors and many incandescent lights, bright lights. So एक room होता था जहाँ बहुत सारे mirrors होते थे, and then there would be bright lights, and these people, these actors and actresses, अभी की तरह नहीं, they are not very influential people. They have the chair, they are put out there, and they suffer the misery of these fiery lights. So the intense lighting and fast paced application made the process feel like fiery misery for those who underwent it. So ये बहुत this process is badly described, saying that जो भी actors and actresses, they used to go through this process, it would be like a misery for them, it would be a fiery misery for them. The use of pancake in bulk shows the industrial assembly line approaching in filmmaking. It highlights the contrast between the glamour seen on screen and the hard mechanical process behind it. तो अभी तक हमने क्या पढ़ा कि जेमिनाई स्टूडियो में जो भी कास्ट था, they would be applied with this pancake keywords है, they would make them look hideous monsters, they would make them look ugly in order to make them look presentable. They sat in the makeup room. कैसा होता था, there would be mirrors all around, they would sit in a chair, they would be exposed to bright lights, and they would suffer misery. But ये सब क्यों करना पड़ता था? So that they would be presentable on stage. तो ये बहुत ही the idea that we are trying to bring here is कि इन सब के पीछे what we see on stage is just actors and actresses playing their part, but what goes behind is a lot of hard work. तो यहाँ तक makeup department and how the application was done. Now, अब आप हायरार्की समझिए. तो ये जो मेकअप था, there were a lot of people who were involved. So you see, responsibility of applying makeup to the lead actors and actresses were chief makeup man would do that. So 4 कैटेगरी है: चीफ मेकअप मैन, चीफ मेकअप आर्टिस्ट, सीनियर असिस्टेंट, वो जो सेकंड हीरोज एंड हीरोइंस, अगर वो चीफ आर्टिस्ट के बाद कोई सेकंड हीरो और हीरोइन है, सीनियर असिस्टेंट उनका मेकअप करेगा, जूनियर असिस्टेंट द कॉमेडियंस एंड द विलेंस इनका मेकअप करेगा, एंड ऑफिस बॉय, although it looks like a very casual term, the office boy would do the makeup of all these crowd who was involved. तो कोई शूट हो गया जिसमें बहुत सारे लोग दे फॉर्म अ पार्ट ऑफ द क्राउड, तो ऑफिस बॉय वुड बी डूइंग द मेकअप फॉर दीज. सो 4 कैटेगरीज है: चीफ मेकअप मैन, चीफ लीड आर्टिस्ट, सीनियर असिस्टेंट, the second heroes and heroines, the junior assistant does for the comedians and people like the villains, and the office boy would do it for the crowd. Now office boy, इसके दो कैरेक्टर्स इन डिटेल डील किए गए हैं, एंड स्लाइटली अ थर्ड कैरेक्टर एज वेल, बट लेट्स स्टार्ट विद ऑफिस बॉय. Now, office boy, his as pehle to, although it says that he is an office boy, he's 41 years of age. That's the funny part, that although he's called an office boy, he's 41 years of age. And office boy worked in the makeup department. He mixed large amount of pancakes in a giant vessel and slapped it on the people who played the crowd. Unexpected details. Despite being called the office boy, he was in his early 40s. His job title contrasts sharply with his age and experience. So, 41 years of age, so quite experienced and influential man, but not influential per se, but experienced man. But what he's doing is in sharp contrast to his age and experience. Now, personal and background and ambitions. So, why had he joined the makeup? I mean, the industry, to become a lyricist or a star actor or a screenwriter or a director. But what he's doing right now is he is an office boy who is involved in doing the makeup of the people who play the crowd. Significance in the studio. His work, though seen as menial, was crucial for creating the right look on screen. His role symbolized the unseen, hard-working effort behind film and glamour. Now, Asoka Mitran का काम क्या था? The writer, Asoka Mitran, his work was he sat in a cubicle. तो वो बहुत बार ऐसे बहुत ही इन अ ह्यूमरस वे ही डिस्क्राइब्स दैट ऐसा, बिकॉज आई वाज सिटिंग इन अ क्यूबिकल कटिंग न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल्स एंड पेस्टिंग देम एंड फाइलिंग देम. क्यों? क्योंकि ये जो स्टोरीज होते थे न्यूज़पेपर में कुड सर्व एज अ a motivation story for the next film or any other project. तो अशोका मित्रन का काम क्या था? He would cut all these stories, paste it and file it. Now, everybody thought that he was next to doing nothing. He was just sitting and wasting time. And so the office boy also thought that. So to vent out, he would go to Asoka Mitran. However, Asoka Mitran was not very fond of this venting out process. So he would often pray ki, there's a crowd shooting all the time so that this man would be gone. The office boy would be gone. Now, the office boy also had a complaint that uski life mein jitne problems the, uski life ke sare problems is because of this another person called Subbu. Now, Subbu is the second character that we deal with. अभी तक हमने क्या किया? Working of the makeup department in the Gemini studio. In the Gemini studio, how makeup was done, how there was a hierarchy, and how we've come to the office boy. Now we come to Subbu. Now, Subbu, uh, his role and influence at the studio. Now, Subbu was the number two. As the writer mentions, he mentions Subbu as the number two at Gemini Studio. So he was the number two office boy, but he was very closely linked to the boss. Now, isme ek, there's this message that, he was a sycophant, a flatterer. He would come up with thousand ways of dealing with the problem. Usko, he wanted to harbor good thoughts, feelings for everybody so that he would succeed in life. Although usko bhi bahut zyada success mili nahi, but then that is what. Now, he's also born into a Brahmin family, so how caste was influential in getting people ahead in life is also what is mentioned in this chapter. Now, Subbu was the second in command at Gemini Studio, closely linked to the boss. So he would always be around the boss, he would always flatter his boss, and he would always get his work done. He played a major role in creative decisions, often generating multiple ideas for a single scene. Though, whenever his boss would get stuck at some place, Subbu would come up with 1,000 ways to tackle that problem. And, he just wanted to be in good terms, in the good list of the boss, so that he would get his things done. Now, born into a Brahmin family, he benefited from early exposure to more affluent and influential circles. His background gave him certain privileges that helped him navigate the film industry. So he could easily navigate the film industry. One reason behind that was he was a Brahmin, and there was a lot of there were a lot many people who still had that hierarchy of caste in their mind. Besides managing the studio's creative side, he was also a poet and a writer. He wrote story, poems, and even a novel, Tilana Mohanambal, that recreated early 20th century moods. Now, hidden meaning and ironies. His loyalties and creative talent mask a subtle critique of how art is commodified, how art was used to get their benefit, the people getting higher ranks and higher positions. The multiple creative alternatives he suggested, like various ways to stage a scene, reflect his both genius and the practical demands of filmmaking. However, he was also a sycophant, a flatterer. You need to know these words: sycophant. Sycophant is a flatterer, somebody who, who flatters you to get their work done. So, Subu is one of a kind. Now we come to the lawyer. The lawyer that's mentioned in this story is the lawyer worked in the story department. उसका कोई department नहीं था. Now, because he's somebody, ये जो पूरा Gemini studio है, it's more like these people are the follower of Gandhi, and they are very ordinarily dressed. However, this guy, the lawyer, he shows a professional demeanor. He's dressed very professionally, and he is in sharp contrast to all these people who work in the Gemini studio. So the lawyer worked in the story department, which was unusual mix of writing and the writers and the poets. Although he was officially a legal advisor, his role was not a typical lawyer's. How did he appear? He wore a tie, pant, and a coat that resembled a suit of armor. His attire made him stand out among the other staff who wore simple local clothing like khadi. Impact on studio culture. His actions, such as recording an actress's tirade during the shoot, had major effects, leading to the end of her brief acting career. So, there's this moment of the small anecdote that's described, the small example. This lawyer was actually involved in, although he's called the legal advisor, he acts contrary to that title. He acts against it, meaning that, he once shot the fury and outrage of this actress, and then he played it, that captured moment was played in front of everybody. And then, because she was a novice and she was an amateur in the film industry, she lost her career because of the lawyer's doings. His presence brought a formal, almost bureaucratic element into an otherwise creative and relaxed environment. Now, symbolism and contrast. His formal look and logical approach contrasted sharply with the creative, free spirited atmosphere of Gemini Studio. This mix of formal and informal element illustrates the complexity of studio's internal culture. So, how there were various people working in that department, various people who were a part of that department, is what is talked about. So, when we are dealing with this, let's talk about the Gemini Studio from the beginning. Gemini Studio, how the makeup department worked, how the actors and actresses got their makeup done, how there was a hierarchy maintained. Then we talk about the office boy who is in his early 40s. Early 40s, and he just goes to Asoka Mitran's room to vent out, and he complains that all his problems and all the problems in his life is because of this other number two at Gemini Studio, Subu. Now, Subu, by virtue of being born a Brahmin, he gets his easy availability and easy navigation through the film industry. And then however, he's also a big flatterer, a sycophant who is kind of a bootlicker, who comes up with a lot of ways to tackle a problem so that he would be in the boss's favorite, so that he would succeed in life. Now, we also talked about the third guy, which is the lawyer. He belonged to the story department, and he stood out. He was in sharp contrast to the story department, क्योंकि the way he dressed was different, the way his work was different from all these simple Gandhi looking men who wearing khadi. So he stood out in those terms. Now, so we did three characters: office boy, Subu, and the this lawyer. Now, this lawyer's a small episode is mentioned wherein he recorded the outrage outburst of this actress who was new to the industry and almost ruined her career. So after some time, the story department shuts down and everybody loses a job because the story department shuts down. Even the lawyer lost his job. And in a humorous way, Asoka Mitran describes how a lawyer lost his job because of the fact that the story was shut, the story department shut down. So then we complete the third character. Now we come to the next character, which is No, the next ideology, that's now how the film worked, we come to that part. तो ये हमारा क्यों ये chapter, what does it deal with? The working and functioning of people and ideologies, and how film was produced and how film was presented in the Gemini, at the Gemini studio. Now we talk about the different attitudes that influenced filmmaking in the Gemini studio. So we talk about communism. Communism क्या है? एक ideology है जो तब के टाइम पे that ideology became famous. And what did it deal with? It talked about a society which had no poverty, eradication of poverty, and then equal distribution of wealth. Although it sounds good, but because it has to do with more capitalist economy like America, so ये Indian economy के लिए it was not beneficial, I mean not practically applicable. That's how communism was looked down upon by all these people who worked at the Gemini studio. Communism क्या था? एक ideology थी which was looked down upon by all these people who worked at Gemini studio. उनको लगता था कि a communist was a godless man. He had no familial bonds. उसको अपने परिवार से, अपने लोगों से कोई मतलब नहीं था, and they did not like the idea of communism. तो बहुत ही लोग उसके अगेंस्ट थे. And then this place Gemini studio had a good coffee. They served good coffee, so over the coffee they would discuss communism and so on and so forth. Now communism के opposite आया Frank Buchman's moral rearmament movement. Frank Buchman's moral rearmament movement जो है, that talked about a counterfeit. It was like an opposition to communism, which talked about more ethical ways of living, humanitarian ways of living. जब ये आया, then they had two plays that they staged on in the Gemini studio, Jotham Valley and The Forgotten Factor. जो इनका सनराइज का सीन था, that was later used by a lot of films in the industry. However, इनके plays ऐसे बहुत ही छोटे होते थे. They always had a small film which had a moral message. तो जब ये moral rearmament movement आया और कुछ लोग यहाँ, they were called the group of circus. So they these people, they came, they presented their these plays, and then they left. It was only later that the SS Vasan, who's the owner of the studio, came to realize that they had come and they had propagated their ideology of moral rearmament ideology, and then they had left. Though Frank Buchman's moral rearmament movement visited Madras, the MRA presented itself as a counter to international communism. They performed plays such as Jotham Valley and Forgotten Factor, which were simple yet very well executed. तो तब तो उनको execution अच्छा लगा, but later on they realized that moral rearmament movement through their plays had proposed and propagated the idea of the whole idea of this movement. तो इन्होंने जो plays किए थे, उनका purpose था कि लोग they come to realize that the plays have a moral, and that morality is to do with humanitarian grounds, everything that is opposite communism. अब क्या हुआ? SS Watson, it is towards the end we come to know, although not clearly explicitly mentioned, कि SS Watson was a communist as well. Now एक the visit of MRA group brought political ideas into creative filmmaking world. Their presence stirred a mix of support and skepticism. तो कुछ लोग, the way they presented their plays, a lot of ideas were used from here. कुछ लोग skeptical थे, doubtful थे about how they worked as a staff. This event highlighted how political and cultural movements could influence artistic communities. So जो art है, that's the influence of art, how art is portrayed on stage. A lot of things have to do with the background, the kind of community that we lived in, culture, politics. आज भी आप देखो filmmaking, a lot of films are inspired by politics, culture in the societies that we live in. So that is what they're talking about when they talk about this, that although these movements were quite some were looked down upon, some were appreciated, inka a lot of things had to do with filmmaking. Now comes difference between these two ideologies. Communism is characterized by a perceived lack of human warmth and moral grounding, while MRA emphasized moral rearmament and return to traditional values. इस chapter में ये दोनों concepts लिए हुए हैं, how they had to do with filmmaking. तो communism was looked down upon, ऐसा मानते थे कि people who are communists, they don't care about anything except for communism. और moral rearmament है, which is a more traditional approach. People like the morality that they preached. Social impact: communists are viewed as divisive, extreme, and capable of undermining family bonds. MRA movement is seen as stabilizing force that promotes unity. Cultural resonance: the studio staff's strong aversion to communism is rooted in their cultural identity and personal experience, which are aligned more with the inclusive and uplifting messages of the MRA. So they were more inclined towards the MRA. एक ये important है, communism was a new political order that was spreading throughout the world, especially in Asian countries. Communism preached equality. आज भी देखो चाइना में there's communism. So communism preached equality of people and abolition of poverty and class division, while it discouraged private ownership. But communism won a negative impression due to capitalist countries such as America. MRA, or Moral Rearmament, was an international team of actors and actresses that spread anti communist feeling throughout the world. The MRA came to Chennai and saw how influential Gemini Studio in the south of India was. The team got permission from Vasan to stage their plays. Vasan was only happy to give them permission because he hoped that his staff would get inspiration, but little did Vasan know of their intentions. MRA staged their plays with hidden anti-communist messages and went away, and it was yet after some time that Vasan realized that he had been fooled. तो बहुत टाइम के बाद वासन को रियलाइज हुआ that they had come, they had preached anti-communist messages, and then they had left. Why should Vasan be fooled if the organization is spreading anti-communist messages in Chennai? It appears that Vasan himself was a communist. तो ऐसा मानते हैं कि he himself was a communist, or he too has had his disillusioned entry and exit from communism. The author has not given us hint about this, and therefore we have two different opinions. If so, Vasan felt terribly bad for being played into the hands of MRA that left deep anti-communist impression upon his staff. He therefore decided to bring back the communist atmosphere in his studio and the communist poet to deliver a speech on how great communism was. और उसके बाद आई entry of Stephen Spender. तो बहुत टाइम के बाद एक entry, there was this mysterious guest who had to come deliver a lecture and go. और उसके आने के लिए बहुत सारे preparations हुए, a lot of things were said, the stage was set, people were warned, but ये किसी को भी नहीं पता that who this guest was, why was he coming, what was the purpose. He came, he addressed the crowd, and then he left. The crowd left in utmost days. उसको समझ नहीं आया कि ये what exactly had happened, what was this, because एक तो उसका accent, Stephen Spender, he was a poet, English poet, so his accent was quite different from the people living in south of India, Chennai, and then they did not understand the purpose behind it. So he came and he left. Now years later, जब Asoka Mitran had left that place, and then he had he was coming across he was going across he passed across a set of books, and he happened to purchase a book that said uh, uh, you know the God That Failed, that talked about six authors who had entered communism and exited because they did not find communism per their liking. तो इसमें स्टीफन स्पेंडर का नाम था, and that is how the author comes to know who Stephen Spender was. So assuming that S.S. Vasan was a communist, and assuming that to be true, now Asoka Mitran connects the dots that he was called to address these people for communism. However, none of them understood. Now, none of the audience, none of the people present there understood what his lecture was about. It was only towards the end of the chapter that Asoka Mitran, he tries to fix the dots and then come to a conclusion that he had been called to address a crowd that dealt with and to explain the concept of communism. Now, Stephen Spender's mysterious arrival. He was an English poet. Unexpectedly, he visited Gemini Studio. His arrival was a surprise because the staff were used to famous English poets like Wordsworth, Tennyson, Keats. इनको पता नहीं कि a much more read crowd, they knew Iliad, but none of them knew who Stephen Spender was. So audience's reaction: his thick English accent and formal manner made his speech hard to understand. The audience, unaccustomed to his style, found themselves confused and dazed. Cultural gap: his visit highlighted the difference between local cultural expectation and foreign artistic expression. The confusion among the staff underscores the difficulty in bridging this cultural divide. The boss and his god that failed. So uh, towards the end जब आप पढ़ेंगे chapter, it's mentioned that although S.S. Vasan, the owner, had nothing to do with Stephen Spender's poetry, he did have to do with the concept of the god that failed. So that is communism. So उसने S.S. Vasan had called probably Stephen Spender to address the crowd on communism, on the lines of communism. However, later, and this is only later that Asoka Mithran realizes it, but however, later we see that even Stephen Spender had talked about entering communism, and later finding that it's not as per his liking, the concepts do not match his ideologies, and therefore he had exited communism. So Spender's visit becomes a symbol of clash between idealism and pragmatism. The speaker's realization ties together the studio's creative challenges with broader disillusionment, both the failure of lofty ideals and the practical, sometimes harsh realities of running a film studio under leaders like the boss. Uh, so let's actually now connect these dots. First of all, why are we reading this chapter, Poets and Pancakes? Because it talks about the working of the film industry. It talks about working of the people at Gemini Studio. अब Gemini Studio में अलग अलग डिपार्टमेंट, अलग अलग लोगों, और how cultural and political views had impacted this studio is what we deal about. तो पहले हम डिस्कस करते हैं how there was a characterization of people working in the makeup department. तो अलग अलग चार categories थे: the senior assistant, and the lead makeup artist, senior assistant, junior assistant, and office boy. तो ये चार तरीके के लोग, they were responsible for different people in the industry and do their makeup. Now ये makeup, Pancakes is a brand of makeup that was applied on the faces of all these actors. वो इतना ज़्यादा, it would highlight their features. It would be so different that they would stand out of the crowd, and people would know that they are meant to represent the actors, lead actors and actresses on stage. That is one. Now, second hai the office boy in his early 40s. He's yet called the office boy because that's how he's, and that's the fun part. That's humor. So he directs all his failures to Subu, another office boy, number two. However, Subu is very he could be very, very, say, opportunist. He knows how to grab opportunity and how to succeed in life. So he's referred to as a sycophant. There are people who either work, or then they are close to the boss to get their you know work done. So Subu was the latter, and that is how he got his work done. Then we talk about this lawyer in the story department, and he although the lawyer acted very much against his name and against his profession, but he was later removed because the story department was shut. Then we talk about how these two concepts of communism and moral rearmament was found their way to the Gemini studio. So communism was an ideology that was looked down upon. लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगता था. They talked against communism. They did not like communism, except for S.S. Watson, which is he was assumed to be a communist. So people did not like communism, and then there was another the ideology of moral rearmament movement. So kuch log aaye from these people. They came, and they requested that, they saw how influential Gemini Studio was, and they wanted to represent their place. So they represented two plays, the Jotham Valley and the Forgotten Factor. तो वहां से हमने scenes उठाए which was later used in movies. But it was only towards after some time that S.S. Vasan came to know that these people had come, and they had shown their place. They have proposed anti-communist messages, and they had left. So then after some time, then comes Stephen Spender. He was called because he was then a communist. So he had been called to propose the idea of communism, and but people, the crowd that had gathered, the audience that had gathered to listen to him, they did not understand because of his accent, and because he came, and the whatever he talked about was not understood, not received by all these people. So he came, he preached, he left. It was only towards the end of this chapter that SS Vasan, sorry, Asoka Mitran, he connects the dots when he comes across that book that says the god that failed. Isme god kaun hai? Communism that failed. So the book was written by six different essays. They talk about their journey into and out from communism. That's how he comes to know that probably Stephen Spender was called by Watson to propose the idea of communism. So that's how the book that's how on that note it ends, saying that SS Vasan ko probably had nothing to do with Spender's poetry, but he did have to do with communism. That's why Stephen Spender was called. So that's about this lesson. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. I will shortly be uploading another video that deals with the humor, satire, and irony in this chapter. Stay connected. Do ask me your queries if you have so. Thank you so much.